everybody, and welcome back to the Girly Girl Bookworm. So today I have my quarterly stats and standouts. So in the past I used to do them seasonally, but I think the hard part about doing them seasonally is it would tie the end of the year into the beginning of the year, and the beginning of the year is so hectic that I totally forgot to do my winter favorites. So I think this year I'm going to try to just stick to quarterly, so January, February, March, quarter, April, May, June, quarter, July, August, September, quarter, October, November, December, and hopefully I'll remember. So I'm going to start off with some statistics, just some basic ones, and then I'm going to tell you my top 5 standouts for the quarter. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out these stats because I felt like I kept counting books like over and over and over again by accident. I have read in the months of January, February, and March, I read 59 books, which to me is insane. I don't know how I managed to do it. I really think it has to do a lot with Black Author Readathon happening in February, where I was so determined to get a blackout, and like a true blackout where I had a different prompt, like a different book for each prompt. So it really kind of like engaged me into like reading everything. So I really dedicate most of my quantities to that. So I read 59 books. I read 11 5-stars, and this is kind of wishy-washy. When I added these numbers up, it doesn't add up to 59, so I don't know what happened. But so, I think there was like 1 or 2 missing. So I rated 11 books 5 stars, which is fantastic. I read 3 4.5-star reads. I read 28 4-star reads. I read 6 3-star reads, 4 2-star reads, 1 1-star read, and then I have 3 books that are not rated, and these are nonfiction books. 2 of them were from January when I decided, like, I was still doing I'm not going to rate nonfiction. Since then, I have changed my mind and I have started to rate nonfiction. So those 2 that I didn't rate were probably, one was definitely a 3-star and the other one was like a 4.5 star. So still really good stats. And then the other one that's not rated is one that I talked about in my March wrap up, which was Stamped, because I just super felt conflicted with it, so I didn't feel comfortable rating it. And actually, one of those that's not rated, that's where it's missing. That's where one of the numbers is missing. I didn't rate a graphic novel. Because I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to graphic novels, because I don't typically read graphic novels, so that one I just didn't rate. So overall, I had an outstanding first 3 months of the year in terms of star ratings and the amount I read. I read 16 audiobooks, which is so also not like me. I don't normally do that, and this year I have fully taken advantage of Hoopla. I've listened to books from my library. I've listened to books through Libro FM, which I love both, and I think what I love most is sometimes I read books from my shelf, and other times I'm reading books that I'm borrowing, and I am really trying to get into that. Reading some books without spending money on them is kind of a nice thing. So definitely trying to take advantage of my library as much as I can with audiobooks. And then I read 11 books through my Kindle, whether that be through Netgalley or Kindle Unlimited. So again, I'm super pumped with that number. Really took advantage of my Kindle Unlimited subscription so far this year. And then I read 32 books physically. Now the cool thing is, like I was saying, some books through my Kindle and through my audiobook listening are books that I own too. So it's not like I necessarily like only read 32 books I own, because there are definitely more books that I have listened to or read that I do actually physically own as well. Genres are always so hard because I find it where some genres kind of blur with others and it's hard to really tell what they really are. So these are kind of estimations, because there are some that are contemporary, but they're also sci-fi. They're sometimes historical, but they're also fantasy. So I tried my best. So it looks like I read 7 thrillers, which I was surprised by it being so low, because normally thrillers are one of my like go-to genres. Romance, I read 16, and again, I think that had a lot to do with the Black Author Readathon, because it was a romance-based readathon, so I read a lot of romance in February. I read 7 nonfictions, which is fantastic because I only read 11 last year, and that was because my goal was to read 1 every month, and this year I didn't make that goal, and I just have been flying through nonfiction. I've read 1 graphic novel, and that's because it was a prompt for the Black Author Readathon. I typically don't read graphic novels. I read one dystopian. I don't know if you can blur dystopian and fantasy together, but one dystopian. One book that had magical realism. One book that had some sci-fi elements to it. One book that was written in verse. 2 novellas, which I'll talk more about later. And then 6 historical fiction books and 5. I literally scratched out. I went 3, 4, and then 5. So I think we're going to settle with 5. 5 fantasy novels. Not too bad. I have read a variety of things by the looks of it. And then breaking down from YA, adult, and middle grade, I read 6 middle grade, which I have a lot to owe to the middle grade March because 5 of those were in middle grade March, and 1 was a book that I was reading to my students in January that I had wanted to read anyways, so I counted it. So 6 middle grade books, 12 YA, which I feel like is more than I have been doing recently, and then 41 adult because that's typically what I do anyways. So that's not super shocking besides the fact that I read more middle grade than normal. Then my top 5 that I'm now making top 6 for this one because I couldn't narrow it down. So I tried to pick like 6 that I felt were very impactful and things that kind of left a memory in my mind about them. So 3 out of the 6 I don't own, and hopefully I will be changing that at some point this year because I want to own all of these. So the first one is the Loss Apothecary, which took me by complete surprise. I talked about it in my March wrap-up recently where I really didn't think I was going to like this one. It sounded very much not what I wanted. It sounded like people who were just trying to kill men to kill men, and it really turned out to be a completely different story from that. Kendra gave it 5 stars. I'd been seeing it everywhere, and then I saw it on Hoopla, and I was like, if I can read it for free, that's a great way to test if I like it, because if I don't like it, I could DNF it. And I devoured it. I could not stop listening. I thought it was super engaging. Dual timeline, so it has the fantasy type of magical realism element, I guess you can say. So I put this in fantasy, but now I'm thinking it could have probably been magical realism instead. So we're following a story in the past, we're following a story in the present about this woman who is on this trip to London. She was supposed to be there with her husband, but she just found out he's been cheating on her, so she goes alone, and while she goes mudlarking, she discovers an old apothecary bottle, and she wants to find out the story. And we're also following the past perspective of that apothecary and how that bottle ended up in the water, and it was fantastic. Then the other one that I don't own is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. Guys, this was gut-wrenching. I gave this one 4.5 stars. And I know I have 11 other 5-star reads, but I had to include this one because it was just heartbreaking. This is following our main character, and she is at a bar and she bumps into this basketball player guy, and they have this really adorable meet cute. Only problem is she has a boyfriend. Other problem is the boyfriend is on the rival team. It's like the night before this big giant game during March Madness, and her boyfriend is on the rival team to the basketball player, and it kind of follows their relationship and their journey to getting to a relationship. There's a whole ton of trigger warnings, so I definitely highly recommend you check those out before picking this up because this hits them all. This hits a lot, and it was amazing. I didn't love the sequel as much. The sequel is a companion novel following his friend. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I can't remember how they're related. Because I still have to read the third one, and now I'm blurring the 2 synopsises together. Either way, I wasn't as big of a fan at book 2 as I was with book 1. But I think it's because it was following some tropes that I wasn't a fan of, and I probably wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't part of the series. But Long Shot is a phenomenal romance. Like I said, very dark. Lots of trigger warnings, so definitely look into them before you pick this one up. Then the last one that I don't own that I have to gloat about and talk about because I talk about it nonstop, so I'm sure you can predict it already, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue. This one is a nonfiction memoir geared towards YA readers, but I think anybody can pick it up and learn something from it. You are following, our author And he is a black man, he's gay, and it's really about him coming to terms with being parts of both communities, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and what has he gone through to really find himself. I listened to it on audio, and he narrates it himself, and it was just amazing. I really wish I had a physical copy because I wanted to highlight it like crazy. So my plan is to eventually pick it up and purchase it and reread it again, because I just think it was phenomenal, and I can't speak highly enough about this one. Then on to the 3 that I own. So I had to include A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is a series. There are 3 books and 2 novellas, and in February I binged. I could not get enough of this series that I listened to the entire series in February. So I listened to all 3 of the books of the main series, and I listened to the 2 novellas. And you know me, I can normally take or leave novellas. I don't normally care. I don't normally look into them. But my library had them all, so I listened to all of them. I couldn't get enough. My favorite, though, is the first book, and that's A Princess in Theory. And in this one, the lady is kind of trying to figure out what she wants to do. She's in grad school. She's kind of juggling what that looks like. And she keeps getting this spam email. And she's like, no, you're going to murder me and steal all my money that I don't have. So she's like, I don't trust you. I'm not doing that. And so really, it's not a spam email, and we've got Prince Thabiso, who is really trying to find his bride, for just basically to get married, so that way he can start figuring out what it's going to be like to be the head of his throne someday. And so he's going to America to find her, because she keeps ignoring the emails, because it's not just a spam email. And so he goes, and instead of introducing himself as the prince, it gets misunderstood, and she thinks that he's just another common person, and they kind of end up sparking this romance. It reminded me of Coming to America. It reminded me of a little bit of Black Panther, because Prince Thabiso has like this assistant who totally reminded me of oh my gosh, I can't say her name. But basically, T'Challa's like assistant. You know what I'm trying to say? She reminded me of her. So, it also reminded me of like The Prince and Me. It reminded me of so many things. Princess Diary. It just reminded me of everything. So I thought it was a lot of fun. It does get steamy because it is a romance after all. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the narration was amazing because it had voice actors, and you need to check this series out if you're into romance. Then another one was Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. This was a book that I read with Mama Leellen over on Instagram. She does have a YouTube channel as well now. And we read this one in February, and this was one that was already on my radar. I already knew I wanted to read it. So when she was like, let's do a monthly book club pick for it, I was like, yes. I couldn't wait to read it and talk to everybody about it. This is following our main character, and she is pretty well-to-do considering she's a slave on this plantation. Her mom is the medicine woman for the main house, so she's kind of treated very nicely compared to other slaves. And she knows that when she turns 18 that they plan to free her. So she's like, great, I'm going to be able to leave with the love of my life, because his plan was to buy his freedom, and we're going to be able to run off together and have this happy life and not be slaves anymore. She turns 18 and things don't go that way. And she ends up being sold to this house, which basically is like this slave jail, and she ends up kind of almost married to the owner of this slave jail, and we're following how she needs to figure out how to survive this new life. And This is heartbreaking. This is brutal. It is super short, and I definitely cried. I definitely got squeamish. I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed compared to what we were getting throughout the rest of the story. But take that aside, this was such a great book. This is one that I'm definitely going to be thinking about for a while, because it was just so well done, and I'm so excited to see what else she writes. I know that she has a couple other books that are more like on the contemporary side, but I'm excited to see if now that she's come out with this, if she will continue to write historical fiction novels, because I want to read all of them. So this one was definitely a favorite. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This one has really, really stuck with me. It's one that I often think about, and this one is about our main character, Enchanted, and she really wants to be a singer. She goes for this tryout, like she tricks her mom into thinking that she's going somewhere to a swim meet, I think, and she ends up going to try out. She wants to end up no, they're in the area for a swim meet, and she convinces her mom to stop at this place, and it turns out to be a singing competition. And they kind of turn her away, but she catches the eye of this producer, and it's just about their kind of relationship, and not a nice relationship, obviously, an inappropriate relationship, and the music business, and it was really amazing. I could not get enough of this book. I could not put it down. I have also since read Muted, which is a story in verse, which was kind of similar to this one. So if you've liked this one, I highly recommend you check out Muted. And if you liked Muted, I definitely highly recommend you check this one out. Tiffany D. Jackson is quickly becoming one of my new favorite authors. I've only read 2 books by her, but I have another one on my shelf that I plan on reading, and then I have another one on my wish list, because I just feel like she is definitely going to be someone who I really love going on in the future. It is YA, but it reads with some very adult themes and adult content. Again, this one has trigger warnings. The one thing that I liked about this one is it literally gives the content warning in the beginning. It says mentions of sexual abuse, rape, assault, child abuse, kidnapping, and addiction to opioids. So I also loved the way this one was told, because it was told in this kind of almost like then and now kind of perspective, where you could tell something bad was happening, and then we would flip to like a story of like leading up to the bad thing. So I really liked how that was told. This one also, a ton of trigger warnings. Please look them up beforehand, because this one, like I said, is extremely brutal. So if you can't stomach it, I would definitely highly recommend checking out trigger warnings for that one as well. So yeah, that's how my last 3 months went. Let me know what you read. Did you find any new favorites? What were some of your top 5s? And I will see you guys really soon. Bye, everybody.